So hello again. For last time, I asked you to read a short piece by John Tomasi, who's a political theorist at Brown University. If you didn't get a chance to read the piece, now's the time to pause this lecture and go back and read it. Very little of what I say is going to make very much sense without having read it. Okay, so now that you've read the piece, you know that the author distinguishes three levels at which one can think about politics in a normative sort of way. These three levels are distinguished by what it is, in fact, that they are trying to justify, or what the project is at each of these levels. The first level is the level of political philosophy. At this level, we are trying to identify moral principles by which one can evaluate social and political institutions or regimes. These principles are going to be things like justice and authority, and then a slight remove from that, questions about desert, what people are owed, questions of need, questions of equality, questions of liberty. All of those questions, all of those values are going to help us identify the kinds of moral principles that are appropriate to judging any particular set of institution. Now, at the level of political philosophy, which is to say at the level of identifying which moral principles are appropriate to evaluating a particular set of institutions, it's not clear how much facts actually matter. Now, what does it mean to say that facts don't matter here? What it means to say that facts don't matter is that when we're trying to figure out, for instance, whether people have strong rights to be protected in their persons and their property, it's not clear how much people's actual behavior with respect to those rights is going to matter very much. So, for instance, if I say that murder is wrong, it's not clear that the fact that that societies will rarely be free of murder, after all, it's part of human nature to break rules. It's not clear that those types of facts are going to matter as to the selection of principles. We don't say, oh, it's unrealistic to say that we should prohibit murder because, after all, people are going to end up murdering one another. The fact that it's not realistic in some sense is not an objection to the selection of that particular principle as one that we should evaluate our societies by. So the fact that we're not going to always live up to these standards isn't a reason for not selecting those standards. Now, switching to the most concrete level of analysis for normative theorizing, let's go to the level of public policy. Now, at the level of public policy, what we're doing is campaigning for specific laws and regulations. Now, at this level, lots of facts are going to matter. When we're thinking about specific laws and regulation, for instance, we have to take as a given the sorts of people that we are regulating, as well as the types of political institutions we are constrained by. So, for instance, in the United States, we have a constitution that prohibits the government, as well as individuals, from engaging in certain kinds of behavior. For instance, abridging speech or searching people's personal effects without a warrant. When we're deciding what exactly our laws against murder should say, how people behave, their particular moral psychology, their sociology, and so on and so forth, is actually going to matter as to what specific laws we put into place. Because, of course, how we prosecute murders may well affect the murder rate, and if our goal is to minimize the murder rate, then facts are going to matter a whole lot. So for instance, to what degree do we hold people responsible for accidents? To what degree do we how do we define particular categories of murder, murder 1, murder 2, and so on and so forth? All of those distinctions and definitions are going to depend on as much on our principles about why we think murder is wrong that we identified at the political philosophy level as how people actually behave, because after all, what we're interested in at this level is minimizing the murder rate. Now, somewhere in between identifying moral principles and campaigning for specific laws and regulations, we have the terrain of political theory. Now, Tomasi identifies this terrain as being one of regime advocacy. Now, what does that mean? Well, regime advocacy means trying to advocate for a specific type of or specific set of institutions. So, for example, should we advocate for a set of social democratic institutions where people are generally taken care of, where the various risks of life are spread out among people are socialized, as we say, or should we advocate for more free market regimes where the risks of the risks that people face in everyday life are internalized by individuals, as are, of course, the rewards. Now, at this level, some general facts do matter, but not infinitely. We assume that the level of regime, for instance, the culture or the sociology of a society, is somewhat but not infinitely malleable, right? So it's possible for us to behave better than we actually do right now if we if we face a different set of political and cultural constraints, a different set of background institutions, in the same way that had we been born, say, in the Congo or Zaire in Africa, we would probably be different sorts of people than we are being born in the United States and the kind of society we have. The level of political theory is the level of profound debate that we have generally in the United States. The debate between Republicans and Democrats about what the nature of our republic is, not about what exactly a certain healthcare regulation should say, but whether at a general level we ought to take care of one another or we ought to be responsible for our own individual fates. That's the terrain of political theory. I introduced these three levels, or I wanted to introduce you to these three levels in order to highlight when facts ought to matter to you when you're crafting your essays, right? So if you're arguing for specific principles, it's not clear how much facts are going to matter. It's not clear how much those principles not being realistic is going to matter. On the other hand, if you're advocating for very specific laws or arguing for specific rules that we should put into place here and now, then it's very clear that facts about both the U.S. Constitution as well as the way the American people are, and so on and so forth, are really going to matter. Now, I'm not the sort of professor who puts a lot of stock in making sharp distinctions between disciplines, between what philosophers do, what political science people do, and what they might do over in the Department of Public Management, say. I introduced these distinctions between political philosophy, political theory, and public policies not so as to limit you or to sort of provide some sharp demarcation line between what we're doing, between what they're doing, but instead I'm introducing these distinctions to try to help you become aware of what kinds of arguments are going to work best depending on what it is that you're trying to do in your papers.